Right, okay, I think we're back with John. Another call coming through. So give us an audio test, John.
Oh yeah, no, it's really good to be here. Busy day. Very sorry to be late for the webinar, but I hope everybody is well.
Right, okay, so I think we've been talking about simple coaching in this world of simple sailing, John. I think we're starting to get some sailing out there, but not quite as perhaps we remember it. But people keen to. So, any sort of key words you think in terms of helping people get back on the water?
Yeah, but I can do simple. People who know me well. Again, sorry for a slight delay in getting here. The first thing I have to say to everybody is please do stay safe. In the UK, we've still got around 2,000 daily new infections, and I think as a sport, sailing, we can really do this. If you look at the 1996 Olympics, which was a difficult time for UK sport, sailing came out as one of the UK's top sports after that. And I think sailing, certainly whilst on the water, is really ideally suited to the social distancing. So I think now is our time, but we probably also need to be patient, not to rush things, do things in the right way, so we avoid taking, say, one step forward and two steps back. If we upset a local authority and they suddenly said we couldn't use the facilities at all, so perhaps now it's the time for those bigger venues where it's possible to social distance and to make the most of the time you have when you're training on your own. I think we talked last time about coaching, as in coaching yourself to win, but just coaching yourself to sail better and going out and doing productive sailing sessions. And the racing will follow in due course. Yeah, well, a lot of the time with the full-time sailors is training. I would estimate we do roughly one regatta per month, and then we're doing a lot more training than we are racing. So if you think about that, we're probably doing 70, 80% of our time is training. Whereas a lot of people who sail at club, traditionally you just go to the club and sail, say, on a Wednesday evening and a Sunday morning, and you do lots and lots of racing as a percentage, but actually um, you wouldn't do that much training. So now's the time, to do that training and get those building blocks set up. And the thing we have here on the display is called a rabbit start. It's really just like a gate start when we used to have huge fleets back in the 80s. And it's a fair way of starting a race. So you literally have one boat sailing a close haul course and then other boats cross behind. So it's completely fair because you're all level upwind. Whatever the wind shift is, you've got a really good fair line. And it's also a very good time and distance exercise because this is, the aim is to almost take the rudder off the boat who's crossing in front of you. Now, please don't do that. I'm not going to mention any names, but I did a training session down at Hayling many years ago, and it took me an awful long time to beat out against the current to get up to West Bay. And I was rabbit for the first start, and one of the top female sailors at the time, who will remain nameless, actually mounted my boat and broke my tiller extension in half, and then I had to sail back in. So the aim is not to take the person's rudder off, but to be very close to it. And with the full-time sailors, this is actually how we start a lot of our exercises, or indeed boat speed runs, when we're trying to just do boat speed tests. And it's perfect for club sailing now because you don't need a committee boat and you don't need any more than the boats taking part. You don't have to even get close enough to talk to each other. You can do little hand signals for who's the bunny rabbit and so on and so forth. And you can easily get a few boats together and go out, and it makes it easier to set a course because you can start the rabbit directly downwind from a windward mark. And I think it's just a really good bread and butter exercise. So this is one of the things that avoids having lots of people in a committee boat.
And presumably, John, it gives some good social distancing on that start line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things is to really try and reduce the number of boats in a small proximity. And rabbit starts, you can do that. You're not going to get everybody crashing into the pin end or the committee boat end if it's favoured. And I think one of the big problems, maybe not so much the launching, is the recovery when everyone comes in together. And that's one of the barriers to having big events. Because you do need big venues. I see Kiel Week is already oversubscribed. Germany is actually in a much better COVID-19 situation than the UK. But by having a big venue, they can social distance, and they've done that with limited entries, so they know they won't have more people and than they can cope with. And that's a very professional team. A lot of our racing in the UK is run by volunteers who are amateurs and possibly more susceptible themselves to COVID-19. So we've got to look after our lovely, lovely volunteers. I think the irony for me is perhaps now the World Sailing World Cup, which always has a very reduced entry, would work quite well. Because venues could fit that reduced entry in, especially in the lasers and the radials. I mean, the entry in the World Cup was tiny compared to, say, Princess Sophia Regatta in Palma. So ironically, the World Sailing Organisation has now stopped the World Cups just when perhaps they might be useful. And I think what we've got for the solos is a fantastic model, because you get lots of people on the water at the same time. And I think the key thing is this is a fun thing. It's not a replacement for nationals, it's an alternative for the nationals. And some people were complaining to me that, maybe the best person wouldn't win. And actually, I didn't see that as the point. I thought maybe somebody, in a tiny puddle, which happens to be getting really good win that day, if they come and they do really well on the tracking, and we have somebody right at the front of the fleet who wasn't normally there, I thought that's a fantastic thing to encourage people.
So we're getting a lot of enthusiasm for the concept that we're doing with the solos, and I think, as you say, it's perhaps a chance for other people to shine throughout the fleet, which will be very motivating.
So many more people on the water than would be possible in one venue.
Well, that's right. So the solo class are looking to get sort of 300 there. We've been working on the Notice of the Race today with James Ripley, who's the National Race Officer, and Doug Latter, the class chairman, hoping to get online entries open in the next week. But already lots of sort of clubs and sailors expressing an interest to get involved. And also other classes now looking to sort of follow a similar sort of area. So we've got the K1s in September and the D0s coming on. And just sort of a brief sort of summary of what this is about. It's about the sort of the solos having events, but also all the processing being done online. Online entries, online briefings, even an online virtual club situation. I think we come to that. So there'll be the online drink in the Zoom bar afterwards, which I think, as we discussed last week, has become a big catalyst in the sailing world, hasn't it, John?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the strange things. I was only just thinking about it, but for nationals, for many, many people, the social is a huge aspect. It's not the championships like a Worlds or Europeans where, the racing is almost everything. For the nationals, a lot of people, it's their one fun week sailing a year. I saw Abersock recently cancelled. I mean, that's a fantastic event with everyone on the beach. They can get a huge number of boats on the beach, although of course other users will want to use it. But without the social aspect, it's really hard. And I think that's something, if people did try and put on a nationals this year, people will really miss. And I think it will be very different. And one of the things I've noticed now, we unfortunately had a very bad incident down in the southwest at Durdle Door. Somebody lost their life when they brought the helicopters in. Of course, people had to make room for them, and there was no social distancing. So I think a lot of places in the country will be very against visitors, because if you had a central point and you brought people from all around the country to an event, that's just a recipe for spreading the virus.
Well, I think that's a valid point, because it is actually almost a discussion on Facebook recently in the last day about how we're presenting ourselves as a sport.
And we have an opportunity here to present ourselves really well.
We do, yes, and they've been pioneering in innovative, but also we have the opportunity of doing it wrong, I think. So by everyone rushing to the same venues and having big sort of congregations of hundreds of sailors might actually send out the wrong message, mightn't it? And I think there's been some pictures flying around of congregations going on already, of clusters, so we need to, I think, be a bit careful, don't we, at this stage?
Yeah, we need to take responsibility. Of course, it would be better if there was clear guidance. So it says, you can't drive more than 100 miles, you can't have more than 100 people at a location, however much they try and social distance. Something like that will make it a lot clearer. But I think in the absence of that, we have to use our common sense. And as a sport, we have a really good opportunity, and it's great to see the solos leading the way. I think a lot of people are resistant to change. Perhaps that's just human nature. But do
you think we're now being forced to change, John, in this sort of a weird and wonderful world?
Well, yeah, if you see, and I'm very sorry I missed the earlier slide, but if you see 2/3 of classes have cancelled their national championships, well, then there's obviously a very good reason for cancelling their national championships. And if just one or two classes try to force it through, it could be a disaster, because all the people who wanted to do an event would presumably try and borrow a boat and get there, and then you have a huge entry, and it makes social distancing almost impossible. I think the idea of all working together and a common approach, and I just like the idea of having a bit more fun sailing. If we look at our governing body, World Sailing, it's all about the Olympic classes. I get that. That's how they get the majority of their funding. And if we look at racing, a lot of the federations will get their medals. They get their funding dependent on medals. So of course they're going to put their effort into pathways that will lead to those medals. But now we have the opportunity to do fun sailing. And I think, almost being forced to sail with somebody on your household can only be a good thing in a way. I think that's great.
And I think it's going to be a return to grassroots, isn't it? It's back to something that we had a few years ago.
Well, every cloud has a silver lining. Yeah. And grassroots, that's where it is. If we haven't got young sailors coming into the sport, then we're going to have a real problem in 10, 20 years' time. I think we've been so successful with the Olympic sailing because we've had lottery funding for the last 20 years. That's a generation of sailors. But if we're not supporting the young sailors now and encouraging them to go sailing, we're not going to have that in 20 years. And I don't just mean the UK, I mean as a worldwide sport. We really need to look at encouraging people, and sailing is fun. And actually, once they get out on the water, the social distancing aspect becomes easy. And we just need to manage it in the right way.
So on that note, we've just started the organisation of the Restart Sailing Regatta, really taking a lesson of the solo class. This will be running at your club somewhere near you. Be able to enter a number of races on the day, all be joined up. So starting the planning for that, August the 30th, so that's the August bank holiday. It's something to focus on. We'll be there to help the clubs. We've got a number of experienced race officers who will be there to put in the necessary risk assessments and the declarations needed there. So we're looking for clubs to sign up. But really, this is the big chance to get back sailing and a big chance to focus on really what wonderful sport sailing is.
Yeah, and done in the right way. I think this idea of the emphasis being on fun, and I think we can actually get more people on the water total at a given point by having events split over a range of clubs. I think every cloud has a silver lining, and there's lots of good things that can come out of this. I go back to the earlier message that I think it's really important that we exercise a little bit of patience, and we start things in a logical way. So, it doesn't make sense to be having a national championship when we're not in the stage of being able to have open meetings yet.
So we're still on the left of the chart of our timeline, aren't we? Really, just basically simple, casual sailing at the clubs. So we're some way off that right-hand side, and realistically, we might not get there this year. Actually,
I mean, it's interesting. Different countries have different approaches, but we're definitely at aggressive social distancing. I mean, if you've got 2,000 new infections roughly a day at the moment, that's got to tell us to be cautious. Whereas, you look at New Zealand and they haven't opened up yet. So I think, you can look at what other countries are doing in terms of their racing, but we're behind them on the curve. So
well, interesting you say New Zealand. I think they've actually had almost an unblemished record, haven't they?
Yeah, well, they're probably one of the most extreme examples. But whenever I talk about, the testing methods they have in Singapore or Hong Kong or South Korea, people say they're very different to us. Whereas I think social economic, we're quite similar to Germany, and they've done a really good job. And I think their testing and their Healthline service is why they're in a position to maybe run Kiel Week. Whereas I don't think we're in that position, sadly, but we've got to be realistic.
Yes, we've got a bit of way to go and a bit more sort of infrastructure to come in place, I think, haven't we? And as you say, it's baby steps, softly. Right.
Yes.
Okay, so finally, next week we look to the final of these webinars. I think we'll probably carry on something, but different sort of thread. And I think we'll try and look to the future, John, and see how we can get this all sort of kick-start. But it's definitely going to be the long run, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I just think it just takes a long time for these things to get going. I think every day it's tempting to look at statistics and see where are we now, what can open up, but actually there's always a big lag in measures taking effect and seeing the results of that. So we're now in the danger phase. And we just want to make sure that things go the right way. So I think each and every one of us has a responsibility. We shouldn't take this too lightly, and then it will be better in the long run. I'm a big believer in the attention to detail, and just little things that we do or perhaps don't do will make a huge difference to the situation we're in 12 months' time for everybody.
Good. Okay. So same place, same time next week. I don't think we've had any. I'm looking at my social media. I can't see any questions coming through. I don't know if you noticed, John, any coming through on your.
I'm sorry. I was literally running to join you, Simon.
But obviously, this will be on replay, and I think there'll be a chance for people to comment there. We'll try and pick up any comments as they come through the next day or next week or so. And, I think that's it for a moment. Let's see anything, John?
No, just stay safe and hopefully see you all next week. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay, right.